Pearlyisms, as it were. He developed from a very early part in his career.
What do you think the, of course, I have to ask this question. What do you think the impact of AI is going to have on things like, branding photography?
Mm. Well, my thoughts on this do change on a daily basis, depending on what I've looked at that day, I have to say. Overall, and we have had, like you have, I'm sure, quite a few guests talking about AI on our podcast. Overall, I'm not too feel too threatened by it. Um, in my 30 plus career as a photographer, I have seen things come, go, and stay, be it, I don't know, what would it be? The digital camera, the iPhone, you know, roll film taking over from sheet film. Okay, I'm not quite as far back as that, but there's always different things as threats that come along, and AI certainly is another threat that has come along. So it seems to be getting better all the time. People do say it's reached a peak and it's not gonna get any better. I don't know. Um, I think what can I say? I mean, I think if going back to my earlier conversation about ideas, I think if you've got good ideas, you don't need to worry about AI. And in some ways, just being a photographer these days is not enough. You've got to be the buzzword, isn't it? Is a content creator. You've got to be a creative art director as opposed to just a photographer. So, within that, you might have video, gifts. I make gifts for my clients. I do all, different parts of my package, d- which I do because I enjoy doing that, not to stay ahead of AI, but I think that's one way of staying ahead of AI is having good ideas and being flexible in your approach.
That's actually a really good point because, of course, when it comes to promoting yourself or your own business, sales photography is uh, it's as important as it's always been. But of course, with the advent of social media, advertising, and social media platforms and all the rest of it, video has become a lot more important than it's ever been.
Yeah.
So for somebody setting themselves up in branding photography, how important do you think is it to also have the video skills to go with it?
Mm. If when I speak to my students, I mix sort and when I was a lecturer at university, which is like 10 years ago, we encouraged students to do video as part of their practice, so I've always been pro video and pro, you know, it's just a means of getting your ideas across. And yes, you're right, video is uber popular at the moment, isn't it? It just seems to be that, the buzzword of photography, it just seems to be the sort of second cousin at the back there, so I'm trying to get a look in. But with photography, I can go and do a face shoot with my client, and they can come up with a year's worth of imagery in about an afternoon. In an afternoon shoot, a morning shoot, they come up with about 100 different images that will last them for a year of social media, websites, whatever. With a video, you've got one video, you can cut it up a little bit, but you've still only got one video. And I think when clients, when you can use that approach and how adaptable photography is, it's still super, super strong. So my simple answer to that is yes, video is popular, but photography still has a mighty place to play.
Yeah, I think that's a generally a misconception is I think that people often tend to think, oh well, stills photography is dead because video is all the rage, and what's the point in stills photography? But as you say, you're absolutely right. You can create a whole ton of imagery that will last you for the rest of the year in you know a morning or at least a day.
A day, let's say
Whilst
a day, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
whilst video, of course, is a lot more involved. There's not only the shooting stage, but there's also the editing stage, and you can only regurgitate it so much um, until it runs out of its usefulness, and then you have to start over again. Um, which is, I think,
Yeah.
as a creator, is probably a good thing if you have a client who's willing to pay. you know,
Well, a video obviously is also, I guess, more expensive than photography, isn't it? Really, because I don't know why that has achieved that in this, but it certainly is more because people think. I think people think there's more of a mystique to video. Oh, the editing is gonna, but we edit in photography as well. We have to edit our stills. That takes time. We've
yeah,
still got the same camera. We've got the same lighting equipment, really. But video seems to be able to sort of bypass all that, and you know, my friends who do video seem to have a higher day rate than I do.
yeah. I mean, video is an interesting thing. I actually just did a video shoot last night where I
Oh,
shot a band,
cool.
and it took, I don't know, 5 hours. We only shot really a verse and a chorus of a particular track because that's all they needed for their, promotional campaign. Um, and it's fun because you can be with that kind of stuff. You can be super creative, and for once, it was a band and there was actually a budget, which doesn't happen very often. That kind of
Well,
thing.
that's for sure, yep.
But it's one of these things where you can be super creative, with camera moves, with lighting, and all the rest of it. Um, so yeah, I like doing videos. I like doing video
Yeah,
shoots.
I get it, and,
It's super
look,
fun.
I'm an old geezer, I've been in the game for a long time, I'm moving more into education, but certainly if I was starting off, again, a video would definitely be without a doubt, video would well, I'd be more of an I'd be selling myself as an art director, more about
Yeah.
coming up with, and you can get these people in, you can just employ people to do the videos or the photography, or do the photography and get a technician in. It's ideas are crucial to all of this.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Actually, that it sort of brings us back to what you said at the beginning of this conversation is where it's based on the ideas. You have good ideas, then that's really what's going to sell. What's going to sell you as a photographer or as a video artist. Um, I want to come back to something that you just mentioned, education. So you said you're moving into education. Tell me a little bit about your educational courses and platforms.
Gladly, thank you, and thanks for asking. As you said earlier, my background, I'm a senior lecturer in photography, and I've taught photography at a very high level for about 10 years, and my master's is in education as well. So, I've always been teaching and always interested in getting across, and helping people and getting the message out there. And so I've come up with this, and let me say how this started. I've heard it said so many times when on the business side of photography, it's all about marketing. It's all about marketing. Photography is not important. 10% of his photography, 90% is marketing. And I sort of get that. Yeah, of course. And I spend a lot of time building up my brand in photography, doing marketing. But my clients come back to me, not because I do fantastic LinkedIn posts or whatever. They come back to me because I'm a good photographer and they like my photographs and I've got a vision, I've got good ideas. Going back to what I said earlier, it's not about, I'm not photographing where you are now, I'm photographing where you want to be. So I've come up with this, uh, I don't know, what do you call it, a package or a teaching platform. That's entitled The Idea of Ideas. So it's all about how do you come up with good ideas. And I've drilled this down into 3 areas, which I'll go through with you, if that's okay. Um, the first one is I call cultural awareness, and it's about being engaged in the world. So, it's knowing about films, like with movies. It's knowing, obviously, photography. It's knowing, going to galleries, knowing the history of photography. It's about reading books, it's about looking at album covers, all these things, all the cultural media, it's about being aware of it. It's, being aware of trends, as you said earlier, being aware of typography. All these things come into the package about how you get good ideas. So my point I was saying here is that you should spend time investing in learning these how to come up with these good ideas. So creative cultural awareness is one. The second one is creative thinking. And I've identified what I call the five R's, the letter R of creative thinking. And they basically are research, rules. So the rules are broken up into, let me see, it's learning the rules, breaking the rules, and then making up your own rules, which is basically style. The third, so we got research, rules. The third part is repetition, doing it over and over again. And then reflection, looking at it and critically looking at your work and thinking what is good and what is not good, and being critical about it, not putting it on Facebook and asking people what they think about it, because you're always going to get loads of likes on there from your family. Worthless, I'm afraid. And the fifth and the fifth element is rest. So it's basically about absorbing, being open to absorb all these, what is going about you, and to come up and being able to come up with ideas. The third bit is the bit that I'm doing my workshops on, which is basically the technological toolkit. And these are all the things that will give you the tools to be able to come up with ideas, the skills, as it were. So this would be, lighting, camera lenses, posing. We've already talked about that a little bit already. Editing your images. All these are the skills that you can dig into that will help you come up with creative thinking. So I've basically put together a workshop, a 2-day workshop here in Bristol, which I'm doing in the end of September, and a 3-day workshop in San Miguel in Mexico in March of next year. And yeah, so that's my next move. I'm moving more into education. So I'm quite excited about that. And this whole backlash about it's not all just about marketing. Yes, marketing is important. But hey, I started off when I first picked up a camera, I knew I wanted to be a photographer. I didn't think, "Oh, I wanna make loads of money and become a photographer." I just wanted to take good photographs, and I still do that. That is still my motivation to take good photographs and
That's
get
I th
paid for it.
well,
Of course,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean,
of
that's
course.
I think the vast, 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 vast majority of photographers that I know, got into photography not because they thought, "Oh, this is a great way to get rich,"
No,
you know,
it's
um, because, it isn't, but, because they felt the love for creating imagery, that's the thing, and of course, as I always say, photography is like a spectrum. Some people are more technically minded. Some people are more creative.
true.
Some people are somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. But wherever you are on that spectrum, photography can be extremely satisfying. For what you do. Um, I always notice that a lot of the time when I speak in camera clubs, for example, I find
Oh, yes. That's right.
that
Yes.
I end up speaking in front of a very technically minded
Yes, that's correct.
crowd.
Exactly. Very technically minded, and believe me, I am not a technical. Certainly not as cameras. Lenses, I'm interested in lenses and lighting certainly, but cameras, they bore me. They're all the same. Every camera is the same, no matter what anybody says. Camera's got 5 functions, and they all have these 5 functions, and
Yeah, absolutely.
that's what
I tell you what,
yeah.
a funny thing is I came across a video earlier today. Apparently, Nikon have released firmware 3.0 for the Z8 or something. And I'm like, oh, okay, this could be interesting. I don't know, maybe there's something. I listened to the whole thing. Not one feature in there makes any difference for me whatsoever.
No,
You know?
no, it's a no, they're all the same. But lenses, I'm very interested in lenses, and I can talk about lenses and very happy to talk about lenses. But the difference between a mirrorless and a DSLR camera, or even a film camera, is minimal.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. 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 It's as I'm getting more and more into different formats, I realize that large format photography is sort of in my head. This is the next level. Um,
Oh, yes. Well,
uh,
okay, if we're talking about formats, that is something that is interesting because square format, 16 by 9, like the old Mamiya camera they used to do, or a 6.7 camera, or a 6.6, they all that makes you photograph and the subject and look at the world in a particularly different way. That does change. But unfortunately, Kirsten, all modern cameras seem to only don't give you the option, do they, to shoot in different formats? It's all basically 4 by 3 by 4, isn't it?
so that's an interesting thing, actually. As my listeners and viewers know, because I've talked about it lots of times. I do a project called 3 Heads in a Row, which is basically sort of a goofy portrait project that I like doing. Just this kind of it's a bit of a caricature, that kind of comical kind of portraits, but I shoot them all in square format. They're all square.
Lovely.
Um, what I've started doing
You shoot them
originally,
in square, sorry, you shoot them in square or you edit them to square?
so originally, I basically the end product is square, and so for a long time I used to shoot them just in standard, and then I used to crop them and perfect. And now I like to shoot them in square because on
Mm.
on my camera I could change the format, so I can
You got the
actually.
Fuji, you got the Fuji. Is it someone told me this. There's a Fuji that does square, isn't it?
Well, this is mine is a Nikon, it's a Nikon Z8, and you can
Oh,
change.
okay, so it's mirrorless cameras that are doing it.
Yeah, yeah, you can
Okay,
change the
okay.
you can change the format in it. Because what I actually find is this is exactly the same. It kind of brings me back to what we were talking about earlier about black and white workflow. I just like to see things in the way that they in their
How
sort of
intended.
final.
How
Yeah,
intended.
exactly how they intended. And
Of course.
thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that clip, then press here for the full episode in glorious Technicolor. Hey, and don't forget to subscribe.